Movies, a form of entertainment that has dominated our society for over a century. We can't get enough of them. Whether you're sat at home on the couch eating snacks or quickly rushing to the movie theatres to get your next fix of movie magic, it's undeniable that movies are huge. Now, speaking of going to the movie theatre, boy, as a kid, I loved it. Pulling into the car park to see the place crammed with people ready to see the new blockbuster. Walking through the doors, the fresh smell of popcorn hits your nose, and the carpets are just the right amount of sticky, but I loved it. You go up, buy your tickets for the movie you want to see, and then head over to buy your confectionery. Now, food and drinks at the movies is a whole thing in itself. First off, you have popcorn. Now, with popcorn sizes, it really doesn't matter which size I buy, because I'll always end up cracking under the pressure and saying yes whenever they ask me if I want to upgrade to the next size anyway. And personally, I don't trust anybody that eats anything besides salted popcorn. Okay, maybe toffee can have a pass. And buttered. You know what, I'm just saying anything but sweet. Anyway, regardless of what size and flavour you buy, it really doesn't matter because 85% of it will end up all over the floor, your chair, or your lap. But hey, it leaves for a little snack for after the movie is done. And don't get me started on the drinks. Now, I am personally an enjoyer of drinks that fall under the slushed variety. Any form of crushed ice slathered with coloured E-numbers, and I am buying it. Now, despite being disgustingly overpriced here, these slush drinks are pure illusion. You buy an extra large thinking you have a gallon of delicious icy goodness, but in fact, that is about 80% air. And if you're anything like me, you finished it before the movie is even close to starting. But when you finally do get your snacks sorted, your drink of choice in hand, you venture into the right screen, wander through the darkness, sit down at your seat, get comfortable, the movie starts, then a man the size of Shaq sits right in front of you, and the person behind you kicks your seat hard enough to break your spine. Through the years, I've become an expert at watching just the sides of a movie. But if you do get lucky enough to have a good view, it's on to the movies themselves. Now, according to Google, there was varied results, but it mainly threw up 8 genres of film: drama, comedy, action, fantasy, horror, romance, western, and thriller. Now, sure, this works great. It's a pretty solid list, but let's be realistic. We can do a bit of cleanup. This one is basically the love child of these two. This one is basically just this one, but in the desert. We'll rope sci-fi onto the end of fantasy, and we need to add animation. And when it comes to drama, I'm staying miles away from that one. This is not a drama channel. Keemstar and Critical can handle that one. So overall, a pretty solid list. Now, of course, these genres can all overlap and intertwine. You can have horror comedy or romance thriller, not to mention those weird specific genres like sports film or medical drama. But let's keep things simple for now. Firstly, action. Now, every action movie almost always rides on the back of its protagonist. A jacked, rugged, ex-military brute with a troubled past and an impeccable set of skills that includes combat, walking away from explosions, driving cars, and having the thickest set of plot armor known to man, to the point that they dodge or absorb every hazard in their way. Now, I will admit, I am a sucker for a good action movie, or even a bad action movie. In fact, the bad ones are arguably better than the good ones sometimes. The weirder and more over the top, the better, really. Like the movie Wild Card, where Jason Statham chokes a man with a handful of poker chips, and then in the final fight of the movie, defeats a man with a knife and spoon. Combat is always my personal favourite with action movies. Whether it's John Wick's perfectly choreographed artistic fight scenes, or whatever the hell they make Jackie Chan do, you can always guarantee I'll be loving it. And it's always a classic of any action movie combat scene with how clueless the grunts are, politely waiting their turn to just be demolished by the undefeatable main character. Or those golden scenes where a character is confronted by a group completely unaware of who they're confronting. The group keep prodding, but then finally, when provoked, they snap and unleash hell with all their might. And action movies often have a habit of being titled with one singular intense word. Rampage, skyscraper, crank, war, faster, sabotage. And 3 of those are starring The Rock. I mean, The Rock is so popular, I feel these days you can walk up to the ticket counter at the movies, ask to watch the movie with The Rock in, and the worker will look at you with a confused look and ask which one you meant. And much like The Rock, it's very common for action stars to basically just play themselves in every movie they're cast in. Dupes of each character they play. Rough, violent muscle men. But there's nothing wrong with that. They're good at it. I mean, they make you root for them. I end up walking out of the movie theatre feeling like I could beat up an entire crowd of people. Ultimately, action is that genre where I know what to expect going in. It's a comfort genre for me. No real complex plot to follow, just eye candy, all over the top. Big explosions, cars speeding everywhere, intense fight scenes. I can sort of just switch off for an hour or so, sit back and soak up the intense happenings of the movie. Fantasy / sci-fi. Fantasy and sci-fi. Your Marvel movies, your Lord of the Rings, your Harry Potters. Now with fantasy and science fiction, they're often the genres that if you enjoy them, you get roped into being called a nerd or a geek. But I promise guys, take it from me, just dress up as Spider-Man one more time to the movie theatre and that girl you like will notice you. Hang in there, champ. But no, ultimately, I guess I would also fall under the nerd or geek category, because I won't lie, I am a stickler for these genres. Sure. Now for me, the golden thing with sci-fi or fantasy movies is the world building and the lore. Sure, you can have cool characters, that's great and all, but if they aren't bound in an interesting world that feels alive and full, it's like they have no real backbone to stand on. I mean, as a kid, I was obsessed with Star Wars, and I mean infatuated with it. Now, I am only in my 20s, so I will admit I was more a fan of the prequels, but before you Star Wars elitists come after me, it's nostalgia talking. I mean, I had the figures, the model ships, I played Lego Star Wars every single day, and sure, the characters were great and all, but it's the way the whole world felt alive. Each race had its own planet that they came from, with extensive history and past battles and ba-da-da-da-da. Actually, it is quite nerdy, isn't it? But you know what I'm saying. The universe these franchises take place in plays a huge role. The living, breathing world itself may be the most important character. Now, it's undeniable that these genres suffer very much from the constant upkeep factor. Take Marvel or DC movies, for example. To keep up with the happenings of the MCU or DCU and their numerous phases, you bet the studios have a brand new movie release or 7 TV shows planned for the next month that fans just have to watch that next installment to see what that specific Avenger has been up to and how it ties into the ongoing story. I mean, I remember a few good years ago, I had never seen a single Marvel movie. Not one. And then a friend introduced me to the first Iron Man, and within 2 nights, I'd watched all 16 movies that were in the MCU at that point. Just because they all tie in and link, I had to watch this one to find out why this happened in this one. They're addictive for sure, and boy, it's a good business model. I mean, it's like a stranglehold they have on their hardcore fans. No matter how awful one release is, as soon as the next one comes out, fans shove that last one to the back of their minds and consume the next, just hoping it'll be better. All the magic in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, from the spells to the locations to the houses, people can't seem to get enough of the stuff.
Allah Mahora, watch this. Allah Mahora, watch this. Allah Mahora.
And these genres have some of the most dedicated fan bases, collectors, stan accounts, fan edits, crying at trailers, cheering in their damn movie theatre.
But why not put this energy into a job or something? Like,
not to mention the merchandise. I mean, these successful movie franchises will take their branding and stick it on any household item. Now, all jokes aside, sci-fi and fantasy is an excuse to get away from the mundane reality of the real world and have fun with nonsensical ideas, people with powerful superpowers, beings from another planet, and build a world wrapping all of it into one that fans and viewers alike can completely get lost in. Whenever I sit and watch a sci-fi or a fantasy movie, it reawakens that small piece of me that takes me back to being a kid again. Comedy. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. When it comes to the genre of comedy, with the Zoomer world of the internet rotting my brain day by day, I think my humour has deteriorated to the likes of a funny image with goofy sound effects over the top. Now, of course, comedy is completely subjective, but I guess, honestly, I don't really find comedy movies that funny. I guess it's kind of the thing where when you're told you should be laughing, or you go into a movie expecting for it to be funny, it never really is. Don't get me wrong, comedy is for sure a fun watch with a group of friends, or if you're under the influence, but I'm definitely that person that laughs at the part of the movie that isn't even meant to be funny, or isn't even the comedy genre at all. And nothing is more awkward than when the movie cracks a joke.
What about just my pussy hundreds of times?
And the entire theatre is just silent. Now, of course, all movies out there need a good cast, but I'd argue that comedy is one of the most important. You need an actor that can understand comedic timing, portray the character well, deliver lines in a funny way, pull off slapstick, and do exaggerated movements. I mean, the whole fundamental concept of actors playing various characters in different movies is a funny one. We all know that moment where you're watching a movie and you point at the screen when you realise you know that actor from somewhere, but you can't quite put your finger on it. In one movie, they're playing a serious role with a hard-hitting storyline, and in another, it's the complete opposite. But if we're talking about comedy actors, there's this strange thing with comedy actors where the actors themselves sort of create a subgenre within comedy through their performance. Jim Carrey movies, Adam Sandler movies, Rob Schneider movies, Adam Sandler movies starring Rob Schneider. And I can't physically take one more movie with The Rock and Kevin Hart as a comedy duo. Like many others, the comedy genre very much suffers from being super oversaturated too. You have comedy movies about meeting the family, comedy movies that centre around kids, comedy movies that the main actor plays multiple characters. You've seen one, you've seen them all. I guess ultimately I'm just coping as a kid that grew up on Gen Z internet humour, but it's no doubt that a comedy movie can be a good watch with friends. And with great, funny writing, a good cast, and an original concept, you do have some comedy gems. And laughter is the best medicine. Horror! Ooh. Horror movies. Now, up to the age of about 15, I'd never watched a single horror movie. Not one, because I was so scared of them. When I was about 7, I witnessed the start of the original Scream movie. You know the scene with the phone and he's breaking into the house? And that was enough for me. I avoided them like the plague. I remember whenever friends would ask me if I wanted to go to the movies to watch a horror movie, I'd always kind of just never give a reason why I didn't want to go to see it and just sort of distract them with a more light-hearted movie that was on at the time. But eventually, one night, whilst at a sleepover, one of my friends decided it would be a good idea to put on a horror movie. Now, of course, I wasn't going to sit there and admit to my friend that I'd never seen a horror movie, and besides, it was already too late. So whilst cowering behind a box of popcorn, I watched the movie Case 39. Now, for any of you unaware, with Case 39, it's a 2009 horror movie starring Renee Zellweger and Bradley Cooper, but that's besides the point. And if you're wondering, as far as horror movies go, this one is not very good. I went into the movie super scared and kind of just ended up really bored. And I guess it was after breaking this horror seal and watching a bad horror movie, it made me a lot less scared of them in general. Basically, the movie's just about a girl that gets adopted and it turns out she's possessed and she's a demon. Pretty common stuff, one of the many horror tropes out there that exist. In fact, the genre of horror is full of tropes. Abandoned scary buildings, characters falling over whilst being chased, groups splitting up, there's a jump scare coming, no there isn't, oh yes there is, characters investigating a noise they hear. I mean, horror movie characters are idiots. If I heard a noise in my house at night time, you damn well bet I'm going nowhere near it, packing my bags and moving out. Now, as I've gotten older through the years, I have watched a few more horror movies, and there are for sure a good few franchises or universes I like, but boy, I'm a big fan of slasher movies. Freddy, Jason, Ghostface, terrorizing a group of unsuspecting victims, and I absolutely love the Halloween series. I mean, I can't get enough of it. And the character of Michael Myers, I just love the idea of this 6'7" man slowly walking around the city, menacingly in a boiler suit with an old Star Trek mask on, preying on people on Halloween night. And no matter what the characters do, he cannot be stopped. Now, I will admit, horror movies do have a tendency to start out really great, and then the sequels come out, and they gradually get worse and more far-fetched. I mean, slight spoiler here, but in one of the recent Halloween movies, the movie literally ends with the entire town beating Michael Myers with baseball bats, and then he stands up and kills all of them. Literally 30 people. But no matter how trashy or far-fetched a slasher movie is, I will always be loving it. Horror movies are for sure very saturated, repeated, and overdone in recent years, but you do get the odd recent horror movie that has an original concept or a good film adaptation, and realistically, if done well, or even if it's just full of jump scares, the horror genre forces a reaction from the viewer more than any other genre. And it sure is fun to step into that dark, creepy world for a little bit and give yourself some spooks, even if no horror movie ever will beat the Scary Maze game or the car drive you through the woods video. Romance. Our romance, or the classic rom-com. An age-old story of boy meets girl, boy meets boy, or boy meets alien. Now, romance movies are great for single people. You can sit back and vicariously live through the insanely attractive, ultra-rich characters in the movie. Now, it's fair to say I haven't watched many romance movies in my time, but we all know how it goes. Either the shy guy gets the girl who's just moved to a new location meets a guy, or the busy workaholic Sigma male that doesn't have time for his lady, and then they work it out in the end, and then they kiss in the rain or something. And we can't forget about the love triangles. There's always that one guy or girl trying to mess up the relationship. They often follow the same formulaic plotline, with two characters who meet, instantly fall in love, have some kind of conflict that they eventually overcome, and then of course, there's the happy ending. Add a few loving gazes, long pauses, and some cheesy one-liners.
I am in love with you.
You might be a simp.
And you've got yourself a movie that's destined for the big screen. And then a few months later, the discount DVD bin at your local superstore. And the romance genre most definitely takes the award for most similar looking movie posters. It is great that these movies do take place in an angelic ideal world though. I mean, can you imagine a romance movie set in the modern day? A girl meets a boy on Valorant, she's his pocket sage, and then she throws a round and he hurls a myriad of abuse at her down the mic. How romantic. Overall, the genre of romance isn't really my cup of tea. most. They're quite repetitive and all follow the same plot. But if you're a single, middle-aged person or a teenage girl, romance might just be the one for you. Animated. Boy, animated movies. Arguably one of my absolute favourites. Now, as a kid, I adored animated movies. And now, as a full-grown man, absolutely nothing has changed. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do love gritty, hard-hitting dramas or action movies, but if there is a good, light-hearted, funny animated movie, I will always pick it over all the others. I would always rush to the movie theatre to watch any movie that basically didn't consist of live-action actors. Now, don't get me wrong, you do get a few anomalies. It's not a perfect genre by any means. I mean, the movie Igor is one of the only movies where I've actually left the movie theatre midway through. Personally, I think it might be my ADHD brain, but I can't help but love the bright, colourful animation keeping my attention. I mean, I love Toy Story 1, and that thing looked like a DS game. And in recent years, things are only getting better. I mean, the animation in recent Pixar movies is borderline insane. It's like experiencing a moving piece of art while sitting back and enjoying the movie. Soul, Moana. I mean, I recently did a Pixar catch-up and found myself watching Turning Red at 3 a.m. And whilst the story was a little bit strange, the animation was stunning. I mean, there really is something to say about a genre that children and full-grown adults can enjoy alike. I mean, some of my favourite movies ever were animated movies. It reignites that childlike innocence where you're taken away to an exciting animated world with fun, new interesting concepts and storylines filled with characters straight from the imagination. And like I said, they aren't always perfect. But whether it's a classic Disney animated movie or a modern computer-generated masterpiece, animated movies can be beautiful and powerful works of art with endless amounts of expression just through the visuals alone before you've even made it to the story. You aren't bound to actors stood in front of a camera. Through their various timeless stories, quotable scenes, captivating visuals, and emotional connections, animated movies have the power to delight, inspire, and entertain no matter who you are. So ultimately, there's millions of movies out there, all in different genres with different actors and storylines. And sure, I have my own opinions, but the joy of film is that you can go out and experience a movie for yourself and have your own take on it. Just for a loser on IMDb to tell you that it was the worst thing ever created and that you should be ashamed to enjoy the movie you just watched. The film industry is only going to keep growing, but whether you're watching a movie alone or with friends, it's a great pastime to relax and step into a story for a while. Whether they make you laugh, cry, jump out of your seat, cringe, or stand up and leave the movie theatre, there is always something for everyone. Not to mention the countless man-hours and huge teams of insanely talented individuals that all come together behind the scenes to make these movies a reality.